We've asked Dateline's Lea Thompson to take us through the current state of airline and airport security and where it may go from here.
For years now, one of the primary focuses of aviation security has been to prevent terrorists from smuggling bombs onto our planes. But what was never fully anticipated was that the planes themselves would become the bombs, guided missiles in the hands of the terrorists.
It was a jet. I couldn't believe my eyes.
The agency charged with spearheading airport security and safeguarding the skies, the Federal Aviation Administration. Now, after the most devastating terrorist attack in U.S. history, the FAA, often criticized for lax enforcement and bureaucratic bungling, is itself under siege.
The FAA has blood on its hands because it's not doing its job and hasn't been.
Michael Boyd is an independent aviation consultant with commercial airlines among his clients.
We have a major security problem, obviously, and the FAA is in the middle of it. We've known this for years. I've said it for years, that to a trained terrorist, our airports look like a laundromat. You can get in and get out.
Along with each commercial airline disaster have come new revelations of serious failures by the FAA. Perhaps none more frightening than the multitude of security lapses.
Asking grandma whether she's packed her own bag isn't security when whole perimeters of airports look like sieves.
1988, Lockerbie, Scotland. A terrorist bomb blows Pan Am Flight 103 out of the sky. The aftermath brought both recriminations and recommendations. Our government assured us airport security would be beefed up. Additional security personnel were hired, metal detectors, X-ray machines, and most recently, bomb detection technology. All were deployed to combat the threat of terrorism. But time and time again, in the 12 years since Lockerbie, gaping holes in security have been exposed. Holes the FAA pledged to fix. Holes that government reports warned still remained. Holes that were likely exploited by these terrorists today. There appears to have been a total breakdown at least 3 airports in this country. Give us the scenario of what might have happened.
Well, there are 2 plausible scenarios. Either someone was able to get through the security side at those airports, or maybe even more likely, people working on the ground crews had been compromised.
How easy is it, and tell us the plain truth, to get a gun or a bomb on an airplane?
There are always some airports that fail when we try to get a gun or a knife on an aircraft.
How easy is it to get a job as a security screener?
It is as easy as falling off the proverbial turnip truck to get a job as a security screener. We have people that would be flipping hamburgers if they weren't working in the security function. They're not very well skilled, there's very high turnover, and I'm not sure that they're up to the job.
But inadequate screening of passengers and baggage is not the only threat to security.
We don't screen the people who work at airports properly. At tests that have been done at airports around the United States, we found a large percentage of, or certainly a large number of illegal immigrants, people whose background that we really couldn't check out.
In fact, as Dateline reported in 1996, our producers applied for and were given jobs at 2 of the biggest airports in the country. At Newark Airport in New Jersey, where one of the hijacked planes departed this morning, our undercover producer was hired on the spot, no questions asked, and no job references checked to drive this electric car. But within 2 days, he was working security, checking carry-on bags. He was given no training. And watch how our undercover producer wanders along tarmacs and throughout airplanes without the ID to be there. And he passes some 10 other airport employees without being stopped. At Hartsfield Airport in Atlanta, our producer was hired as a baggage handler without the required background check. Again, he was free to roam on airliners like this one. After Dateline's broadcast, the FAA did change policy to try to prevent these types of security breaches, but recent government reports indicate problems persist. This year, the General Accounting Office warned security screeners at U.S. airports continue to miss as many as 20% of weapons smuggled in carry-on luggage during FAA-sponsored tests. and that FAA plans to improve hiring, training, and supervision of security screeners, including the companies that provide them, are woefully behind, in some cases up to 2 years. It's too early to say whether the terrorists gained access to the planes today because of poor security checks or someone working on the inside. But this much is clear. The hijackings were well planned and the terrorists highly trained. Once on board, they knew exactly what to do. Experts say once airborne, there was little the crew could have done to fend off the attackers.
Once on board the aircraft, it would not at all be difficult to gain access to the cockpit. The cockpit door is not like the vault door in a bank, for example. They're rather fragile. You can kick them in if you had to.
Barry Schiff is a retired commercial pilot for a major airline who flew both Boeing 757s and Boeing 767s, the same kinds of jets involved in today's attack.
Pilots go in and out of the cockpit as they need to go to the restrooms. Coffee is brought to them, so the door is opening every once in a while anyway. And even if the cockpit door were locked and nobody were going in or out, it would not be difficult to threaten a flight attendant such that she would get the pilots to open the door because of fear for her life.
Though pilots are trained to handle hijackings, Schiff says historically they don't usually result in fatalities, much less the downing of an airliner.
In most cases, a hijacking is not a dangerous situation. Most hijackings are easily resolved. There's very little a pilot can do if an armed hijacker comes into the cockpit. In most cases, he'll believe that a hijacking is going to end peacefully. In most cases, they normally do. He would have no idea that his aircraft were going to be used as a missile.
Commercial pilots do have the ability to push a button to communicate to air traffic controllers that their plane has been hijacked. But apparently none of the pilots this morning even had a chance to send the signal.
If one had to speculate, I would say the terrorists were flying the aircraft, not the airline pilots who should have been flying the airplane. Mainly because I don't believe any airline pilot would intentionally fly into the World Trade Center, even with a gun at his head.
We may never know exactly what happened in the cockpits, but both the FAA and the airlines had to have known that something was terribly amiss, as each of the planes veered inexplicably off their flight paths. What you are looking at is the actual radar tracking of the 2 flights that left Boston's Logan Airport this morning. American flight number 11, shown here is the blue plane, takes off first. United Flight 175 takes off next. Both proceed west towards Los Angeles. They are fully fueled for a transcontinental trip. Then, somewhere near New York State, the planes abruptly change direction, now flying southeast to Ground Zero, the tip of Manhattan. American Flight 11 finds its target first, Tower number 1. 21 minutes later, American Flight 175, in red, flies south of Manhattan, then makes a sharp turn to the north, where its final chilling moments aloft were captured on videotape. Meanwhile, United Airlines Flight 93 leaves Newark Airport in New Jersey for San Francisco. The radar shows that somewhere near Cleveland, the plane makes a sudden U-turn, then disappears. It crashed in this field near Pittsburgh. Its final destination unknown, but experts suspect that it was likely headed to a target in Washington, D.C.
Since the airplane crashed in a rural area, that there might have been a struggle on board that aircraft between the crew and the hijackers, and that the crew somehow managed to thwart the hijackers' intent of crashing that airplane into something else.
If that's true, the crew probably saved hundreds, maybe thousands of lives on the ground. Unfortunately, even their heroics will not be enough to save the aviation system upon which America relies so heavily.
A linchpin of our economy is our air transportation system. We can't do without it. It's not an accessory. As of today, that linchpin has been shut down. In the coming months, what we're going to find is an air transportation system that's totally different than we've known. It's going to be one where airports are going to be basically armed camps.
Providing safe and secure passage for the 640 million passengers passing through 1,000 screening checkpoints, traveling with more than 2.5 billion pieces of carry-on and checked luggage, flying on 97 air carriers is a monumental task that will likely take years to manage.
That's Dateline's Lea Thompson tonight on the state of airport security in this country and airline security. Some very sharp critics in there. It will get much tougher in the days immediately following this terrorist attack and for months and probably for years to come as well.